Good evening. Welcome to Leesville First Baptist Church. We're studying the book of Exodus, chapter 24 tonight in our Wednesday night Bible study. So he said to Moses, "Come up to the Lord, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and worship from afar." Lord, it's exciting to think about how much you love us and the plans you put into loving us, the provisions you make for us. Help us to always know that we are your people, that you've claimed us with a holy love, and we are forever changed because we are now the sons and daughters of the Almighty God, adopted through your Holy Spirit. And we pray in Jesus' name tonight for wisdom and courage. Amen. We've been talking about the training of the people of Israel. We've been talking about their the little rules that God has made, the practices, the precepts he's been giving them. Tonight we're about to begin the 10 Commandments, the core of the covenant with God. It is the theological underpinning for the nation of Israel, for the people of God. When asked what the greatest commandment was, Jesus said to love the Lord your God with all you have, heart, mind, soul, and strength. And the second half is to love your neighbor as yourself. He was referring to the 10 Commandments. This is what it takes to be the people of God, the 10 Commandments. But it's more than just a how-to. It's a covenant. It's a contract. It's an agreement. God is making a covenant with us. The word covenant in the Hebrew is the word cutting. They would cut a piece of meat off their hand and hand it to the person they were making a contract with. And he would do the same. And that meant that I'm with you as a witness to make sure you do what you promised, and you're with me making sure that I do what I promised. It means I have a piece of God. And God has a piece of me, and we know through Jesus Christ. So this covenant changes everything. It's like a marriage. Two people can agree to be friends, can agree to live together, can even say they love one another. But when they make a covenant of marriage, they are forever changed. God's been preparing his people, and now it's time. And he says to Moses, "Come up to the Lord, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and worship from afar." Now, the word elders there, it kind of confuses me, because all the commentators say it's a weird choice of words. It means the corner pegs of the tent. When we think elder, we think old men, and certainly they were, but they were the corner pegs of the tent. And so many commentators said that's a weird expression, but not to me. I don't know if I'm just dense and I'm missing the point, but we call such men the pillars of our church. And I think it's the same thing. These men are the corner pegs of the tent. They hold the tent together. These men are therefore very, very, very important. Without them, things would unravel. Things would fall apart. So these are 70 of the best men of Israel. "And Moses alone shall come near the Lord, but they shall not come near, nor shall the people go up with him." part of that's because of the fear of the people who had asked, this is too wonderful. This is terribly wonderful. Don't make us go close to this. It scares us. And part of it's because Moses needs to be designated as God's man. It also, thirdly, shows respect for God. So Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord and all the judgments, all the commandments. And all the people answered with one voice. It doesn't mean they spoke at the same time and had to say, 1, 2, 3, Jinx, you owe me a Coke. It means they all agreed. They were all of the same mind. And said, all the words which the Lord has said, we will do. And Moses wrote all the words of the Lord. And he rose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain. And 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. 1 pillar of rock representing each tribe. Verse 5, and he sent young men of the children of Israel, strong young men, capable young men, who offered burnt offerings. And in Hebrews we're told that it was a multitude of animals. We see oxen, there were goats, there were sheep, there were cattle. They offered burnt offerings are for sin, and sacrificed peace offerings. Now, a peace offering is done most of the same way that a burnt offering is, except a burnt offering is completely burned up. You don't keep any part of that, but a peace offering, you would burn a portion of it so that the smoke would go up to God. But another portion you gave to the priest as payment. But the main portion you kept and you ate. You didn't burn it, you cooked it. The idea being, I'm sitting at the table with God. That's why it's a peace offering. We're right with each other. We can sit at the same table and eat. And Moses took half the blood and put it in basins. And half the blood he sprinkled on the altar. He's making a contract with God, a blood oath. We're going to keep this contract. We're going to keep these, we'll find out in just a few minutes, just in a few weeks, is going to be the 10 Commandments. God put the blood upon himself saying, I'm going to be bound by this covenant. It's one of the reasons the church is called the bride of Christ. We have a covenant with God through Jesus Christ, and we are forever his. It's not just God's goodwill, even though he's loaded with that, but it's a covenant he's made. There are other places like in Nehemiah where he says, the only reason I didn't let you be destroyed is because of the covenant. I made a contract and I'm going to keep it. So he keeps half the blood in basins, half the blood he sprinkles on the altar. Now visualize, you got the altar, a rock, which is not an idol. It doesn't symbolize God. It doesn't take the place of God, but it is a focal point as we think about God. And around it are the pillars, 12 tribes. Just like a bride and groom standing side by side. Verse 7, and he took the book of the covenant and read in the hearing of the people. And they said, all that the Lord has said we will do, and be obedient. Remember, this is a blood oath. Verse 8, and Moses took the blood, sprinkled it on the people. Now, I told you that there were somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.8 to 2 million people. The Bible doesn't say for sure, but most people believe he sprinkled it on the 12 altars. Because the altars took the place. If the pillars took the place. If the altar is the focal point for God, the pillars are the focal points for the 12 tribes. So more likely, he sprinkled it on the 12 pillars, symbolizing that he is sprinkling the people. and said, "This is the blood of the covenant, which the Lord has made with you according to all these words." This is a big deal to God. There's life in blood. God is teaching his people that sin is fatal, and a sacrifice of life has to happen to pay for sin. That's why Jesus had to die on the cross. But it's also identification. And it's also covering. By covering me, I am no longer me, but I am the property of God. Jesus takes this idea. In 1 Corinthians 11, verse 25, we know this very well. In the same manner, Jesus also took the cup after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. This do as often as you drink it in remembrance of me." Jesus says, I'm going to give my blood to make a new covenant. I'll be covered with blood. God, therefore, is covered with blood. And mankind will be covered with blood through me. And all of you who drink this, you're not drinking a blessing into yourself, as some say. It's not a sacrament. There's no magic in it. It's a memorial. We remember what Jesus did. He himself said, "It is finished" on the cross. He shed his blood once for all time, Hebrews tells us. There is no multiple opportunity for extra blood pouring. It's a memorial. Remember what I did for you. Just as Israel's supposed to remember, they have a covenant with God. Just like a husband needs to remember when he looks at other women, he has a covenant with his wife. And a wife has a covenant with her husband. Then Moses went up, verse 9, also Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, and 70 of the elders, the corner pegs of Israel, and they saw the God of Israel. Well, in the Hebrew, it also means they faced God, but they didn't see him. In Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 15. "Take careful heed to yourselves, for you saw no form when the Lord spoke to you at Oreb out of the midst of the fire." Notice the description is just of what's under his feet. They faced God, but they didn't see God. No one can look upon the face of God and live. Now, some people want to solve this problem by saying, well, that it was Jesus, and they saw Jesus. Well, I think the Bible might have said something like, there was something like the Son of Man, as it did in Daniel. But it didn't. It said so they were face to God. And there under his feet was, as it were, a paved work of sapphire stone. Now, before it was just stones, bricks. Now it's sapphire. It was like the very heavens. Literally, it was like the very substance of heaven. Because it is. This is God's heaven in its clarity. So it was the stones were transformed into sapphire, a sapphire floor, or a sapphire pedestal that's under God's feet. This is the same image we see of God in say, Revelation. Ezekiel talked about him sitting on a sapphire throne. It symbolizes heaven. Verse 11, "But on the nobles of the children of Israel, he did not lay his hand." Literally, he didn't stretch out his hand. They were there, but they didn't have any part of this. So they saw Moses, so they saw God, they faced God, and then ate and drank. It was enough for them to be in the presence of God. Verse 12, then the Lord said to Moses, come up to me on the mountain and be there. And I will give you tablets of stone and the law and commandments which I've written, that you may teach them. We know what those stone tablets are going to be. Verse 13, so Moses arose with his assistant Joshua, and Moses went up to the mountain of God. It helped to have Joshua with him. As we're going to see, this is going to be physically taxing and lonely. And it was good for him to have Joshua with him. Verse 14, and he said to the elders, wait here for us until we come back to you. Indeed, Aaron and Hur are with you. If any man has a difficulty, let him go to them. Those two are in charge, in other words. Verse 15, then Moses went up into the mountain, and a cloud covered the mountain. The Shekinah glory of God is indicated here, whether it is or not. I know the Shekinah glory was like a smoke, and this is a cloud, but it's the same idea, that it covers it, because remember, you can't see God. His glory is not only more than we could stand, it's more than we could ever understand. So we can't see God. He covered his glory. His glory blurs out our intelligence, blurs out our thinking. Verse 16, now the glory of the Lord rested on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. On the seventh day, he called to Moses out of the midst of the cloud. So for 6 days, sat there twiddling his thumbs. Verse 17, and the sight of the glory of the Lord was like a consuming fire on the top of the mountain in the eyes of the children of Israel. It looked like the whole mountain was on fire. A consuming fire. That means the biggest of bonfires. A consuming fire is a fire that burns everything. Throw anything to it. Throw metal into it, it's gone. It burns everything. So Moses went into the midst of the cloud and went up into the mountain. And Moses was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. Now in Deuteronomy chapter 9, just as an aside, Moses said, when I went up into the mountain to receive the tablets of pine, again, this is Deuteronomy 9:9, tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant which the Lord made with you, then I stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. I neither ate bread nor drank water. So he is supernaturally protected here for these 40 days. You can go, well, most people say you can go 3 weeks without food. Maybe some of us can go longer. But no one goes more than three or 4 days without water. 40 days, no water. So he was obviously supernaturally supported by God during that time. This is a big lead up. You may say, well, there's not a lot in here. There's a ton in here if you understand what's about to happen. It's like the wedding rehearsal, getting ready for the wedding. The people are about to be wed to God permanently. They are the people of God forever. Now, Paul tells us that for a time, the nation of Israel has been grafted off the vine because of their iniquity, their infidelity. They've divorced themselves from God, but only for a time. Paul says God did this so that the Gentiles could be saved, so that you and I could be saved. But it's God's intention to bring his people back before this is all said and done. Short Bible study tonight, but look what we dealt with. We're getting ready to forever join the people of God with God, just as Jesus did with us in the Lord's Supper, to remind us of what he did on the cross. Blood, sacrifice, life, the giving of life. Think about these things as we as we go this week. And until next time I see you, in Christ's service and in yours, I am your pastor. Good night.